So you're faced with this problem, negative 2 sine squared x minus 11 sine x equals 5. And hopefully, if I'd given you this problem, negative 2x squared minus 11x equals 5, you'd tell me that you would go ahead and subtract 5 from both sides, setting all terms on one side and 0 on the other. When we do that, this allows us to factor this side, factor the expression, so that I get independent factors equal to 0. And they're independent because of the 0. If this is not 0, then they wouldn't be independent factors. So we're going to do the same thing, except our issue here is we have this function that's encapsulating or enclosing the x. So we're going, because it's squared, we can use the same, essentially the same algebra to do this. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides, and subtracting 5 from both sides leaves us with this. And then I'm going to, I don't need to do that. I'm going to take negative 2. I'm going to multiply it times negative 5 to get 10. I'm going to find factored pairs of 10. And this is factoring by grouping. And so I get 1 and 10 and negative 1 and negative 10. And then this guy is the one that adds up to, these two will add up to, these two will add to be negative 11. So that informs me how to split my middle term. And so I end up with negative 2 sine squared x minus sine x minus 10 sine x minus 5 equals 0. And so again, this tells me how to split the middle term. Notice the negative 10 here and the negative 1 here. Then I'm going to group these terms. I'm going to group these first two terms. I'm going to group the second two terms. And I'm going to factor. Greatest common factor from these two terms is negative sine x. That leaves me with negative 2 sine x minus, so I pulled out the negative. Yeah, I factored out the negative. So that's going to be plus, that's going to be plus, that's going to be 1. And then I'm going to factor a negative 5 from here. So I'm going to have negative 5 times 2 sine x plus 1 equals 0. Now that I'm finished with that part, this is the same as that, so I can factor this from the left term, and I can factor the same factor from the right term. I'm going to be left with 2 sine x plus 1 times negative sine x minus 5. That is all. It's still equal to 0. And now, if I can make this factor 0, the whole thing is 0. If I can make this factor separately 0, then it's equal to, then the left-hand side will be equal to 0, and we'll have statements, true statements for both of these factors. So when is 2 sine x plus 1 equal to 0? I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides and divide both sides by 2. So I get sine of x equals negative 1, then divide both sides by 2, and I get that. Where is sine negative 1/2? Well, it's negative 1/2 here and over here. And that's when the angle is 7 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. And then for this guy, I got, let's go back to yellow. Negative sine x minus 5 is equal to 0. I'm going to add 5 to both sides. And then I divide both sides by negative 1. And you may already recognize it, but there is no angle for which I can take the sine of and result and get a, or have a resultant of negative 5. Because remember, sine, if we look at the function graph, sine is restricted in the range to be between 1 and negative 1, or negative 1 and 1. So I can't get a negative 5. So my only answers for x are those two. So x equals 7 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6 pi. So that's that guy.